Welcome to this presentation on perceptions of flash drought. My name is Tonya Haigh and I'm a research sociologist with the National Drought Mitigation Center. Over the past few months, I worked with a team of NIDA staff to administer a survey to inform the efforts of this workshop to better understand and meet end user needs related to flash drought. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to share what we learned from the survey with regard to how flash drought is understood within and outside of the research community. While we're very interested in your perceptions as flash drought experts, we also really want to understand the perspectives of those who use drought information in decision-making and policy-making. So we invited everyone in the NIDA's dues mailing lists and newsletter to take a survey on flash drought. The survey had two sets of questions, one for flash drought researchers and one set for end users of drought information. We don't have an exact number of people who received the invitation, but the estimate would be about 6,000 individuals or a bit more. So many people who do research related to drought or flash drought responded to the survey invitation, and thank you for that. But we did not have a large response from end users, less than 5%. So we won't be reporting the survey results as being truly representative of end users as a whole, but rather providing snippets of input, like if some extra end users who are interested in flash drought could be at this workshop today. So, who are these folks who are joining us at the workshop through their survey answers? Of the end users who responded to the survey, 47% have a role in communicating information to others. 41% classified themselves as decision makers. 38% are educating and engaging the public, and 11% are policymakers. Most are federal, state, or local agency employees, but there are a few individuals representing tribal agencies, businesses, nonprofits, media, and other affiliations as well. And they work with a variety of sectors. Most work with water management, agriculture, crops and livestock, forestry and ecology, and hazard and emergency planning, response and relief. A smaller number work with fire management, energy or business, public health, or recreation and tourism. Tomorrow you'll be talking about the needs of these specific sectors, and you'll use some of the survey results to inform those discussions. But today we're going to talk about the perceptions of end user respondents as a whole group. So we had responses from end users in all parts of the country, and we asked them if they had heard the term flash drought to describe drought in their region. And overall, about half had heard of flash drought and half had not. I'd say given the bias of the survey response, I'm guessing that in the actual population of NIDA's contact lists, a much lower percent has probably heard of flash drought. But we did find that respondents in some regions of the country are more likely than others to have heard of flash drought, namely the Northeast, the Southeast, and the Midwest, as you can see in this graphic. Respondents in the Northwest and Southwest are least likely to have heard of flash drought to describe drought in their region. We asked all of the respondents who had heard of flash drought if they think the distinction between flash droughts and other droughts is useful for monitoring and communicating. And what we heard is that essentially flash drought researchers find the distinction more useful than do end users or other researchers. As shown in the bottom bar, almost 90% of flash drought researchers see the distinction as at least moderately useful. While in the bars above, you can see that it's more like 60 to 65% of end users and other researchers who see it as at least moderately useful. Further, of those who have heard the term, a little over 50% of end user respondents find the term flash drought to be at least somewhat confusing. So to better understand why there might be some confusion and some equivalence about the usefulness of the concept, we investigated how flash drought researchers and end users understand flash drought. We asked end users what they think of when they hear the term flash drought, and we asked flash drought researchers how they intend it to be interpreted when they use the term. We got a wide variety of responses with some themes emerging, and those are listed on this slide. Respondents talked about interpreting the term flash drought in terms of the speed of onset or intensification, the duration of the event, the drivers or causes of the event, the impacts, the season or seasonality of the event, the intensity of the event, the extent in terms of being localized or more widespread, the ability to forecast or predict it, and there were a smattering of other comments. And of course, some respondents expressed uncertainty about the meaning of flash drought. So I coded the responses for these themes to see how often each was mentioned by researchers and end users. And this graph shows the percent of respondents in 4 different groups who mention each theme. It shows the percent of flash drought researchers in blue, other researchers in gray, end users who have heard of flash drought in orange, and end users who have never heard of flash drought in yellow. The most common theme mentioned is the rate of onset and intensification. But of end users who have never heard of flash drought, respondents were less likely to mention the rate of onset and slightly more likely to mention the drought's duration. Duration was also mentioned by over 25% of end users who have heard of flash drought. End users also mentioned specific drivers such as lack of precipitation or high temperatures and the impacts that might occur. And other themes were mentioned less frequently. But as you can see, every theme came up at least to some extent in every group. So to add to our understanding of why the concept of flash drought may or may not be confusing or useful, we also asked end users about flash droughts that they have experienced. We asked them to provide examples of what they would consider to be flash drought events, in addition to 6 events that we listed for them in the survey. Examples include drought events from the 1970s and every decade since then, and located across the country, with Western U.S. examples showing up more so in the last 5 years or so. Many respondents gave examples from this year. You may dispute whether these all should be considered flash drought events, but it may be useful to consider the examples that came to people's minds. We asked end users whether the flash droughts that they had experienced seemed more similar or more different compared to other droughts in their region. The percent who said flash droughts were mostly similar to others is in blue, different is in orange, and those who said they did not know is in gray. So, in many parts of the country, respondents are more likely to say that the flash droughts they experienced were more similar to other droughts than they are to say that the droughts were more different, particularly in the Midwest. But in the Northern Plains and Southeast, the respondents were as likely or more likely to think the flash droughts they experienced were more different from other droughts. So you can see a little bit of a regional difference there, but a good proportion in every case of folks who thought the droughts seemed mostly similar to other droughts. So we asked them to describe what they thought was similar or different, and here are a few examples of how respondents see flash drought events as being different from other droughts. Many of the comments align with the same themes described earlier. So, an example of a difference in drivers is captured in this quote. The early onset of hot temperatures combined with extremely low growing season rainfall was unique to me. An example of different speed of onset. The drought event completely reversed previously wet conditions in an unusually short amount of time, so fast that it became difficult to accept that wet conditions were completely erased and not persisting. Different impacts are described as rivers, lakes, and streams were not affected, water supply and industry were spared. Some mentioned perceiving the drought, the duration of the drought as being shorter than other droughts in their region. And some pointed to the intensity of the drought they experienced, saying it was more acute than others. And some respondents used those same themes to describe how the flash droughts that they experienced were similar to other droughts. For example, one person said that climatologically, the progression was similar, even though it was more rapid. And one said that they saw that the impacts eventually seemed to converge with other slower developing droughts. And one commented on the perceived speed of onset, saying, "It seems that most all drought events come upon us faster than we expect." These comments illustrate how flash drought might not be seen as something essentially different from other droughts, leading to confusion over the term. So with these results, perceptions of flash drought can be examined to some degree by the end user's region, sector, types of impacts that they experience, the drivers of the events, and the seasons of the drought emergence that they experience. And I hope you'll spend some time with the full survey report to do that. And then as you reflect on their answers, we are interested in, does it seem to you that tailored definitions of flash droughts might be needed for different seasons, regions, sectors, drivers, and/or impacts? So in the survey, we asked for your opinions on this. And in the graph on this slide, you can see what we found. You can think of the orange and blue as the percentage of those who have strong opinions for and against, while those in gray are neutral. So, almost 80% of flash drought researchers said that flash droughts might require tailored definitions to address the types of impacts that they produce, for example, agricultural versus hydrologic impacts. And almost 70% said that flash drought definitions should be tailored by driver, distinguishing between those caused by heat waves versus precipitation deficits or lack of snow. But almost 30% said that drought drivers do not require tailored definitions. Approximately 60% said that tailored definitions might be needed for various sectors or geographic regions of the country. And then just under 50% of you thought that flash drought definitions might need to be tailored depending on the season in which it develops, but over 30% of you said that they do not. So, to wrap up, we find some difference of opinion in the usefulness of the distinction of flash drought and some confusion over the concept for end users. While the speed of onset seems to be the most common trait setting flash droughts apart from others for most respondents, other characteristics of the drought event may also be considered by some, and they may not align with the intentions of flash drought researchers. In addition, some end users may not be perceiving major differences between what we call flash drought events and other droughts that they experience, particularly in certain regions of the US. And finally, among flash drought researchers, there seems to be some discussion still needed over whether tailored definitions of flash drought might be useful for effective monitoring and communication. So in the time that we have now for discussion, and throughout the workshop really, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear if you're surprised by any of the findings. Do you see serious gaps in understanding between researchers and end users? And if so, what needs to be done to close the gaps? Thanks again for your participation in the survey and for your time today. Please feel free to contact me if you'd like to discuss the methods or the results further. My contact information and that of the NDMC is listed here. And with that, I will wrap up and turn the discussion over to Marina. Thank you.